Hi, I'm Chris Lord-Alge, and welcome to Mix LA. This is my mixing studio here in beautiful downtown Tarzana. This is where we make all the action happen. This is where the hits are made, this is where the music rocks, and this is where we show you how we do what we do here. Well, let's think of the artists I've worked with. I would say it starts at All American Rejects and heads all the way down to Zebrahead. And in between, we could have artists like U2, we could have Bruce Springsteen, we could have Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, we could have Green Day, we could have Alanis Morissette, we could have Bon Jovi. Sometimes I actually have to go up to All Music to just remember all the names. It's most of the time I'm remembering the current names of what's coming out, like Daughtry or upcoming Creed or, artists like that. But it's a pretty wide spectrum that covers from hip hop to hard rock. Okay, well, we're back here at Mix LA behind the console here with me, Chris Lord-Alge, sitting at my SSL 4K. And we're going to talk some more about the classic compressors for CLA. And we have a file up by an artist named Hot, and it's brand new, spanking new, production by Steve Hott and Brian House, song called Here For You. We're going to run through some of the plugins right away here and see what we do with them. One of the first ones that I usually check right away is what's the most important part of the song to me is the vocals. So we look right now at the personality of the vocals. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to play a bit of the song with the plugin engaged on the vocal.
How many times can I say it? I don't know why you don't think.
This is our Blue 1176 plugin.
If we just talk it out in a time when there's doubt, I know everything will fall into place. Every bridge that we cross isn't easy. Every line that we draw, we don't mean it. When we say it in anger, we fall into danger. You're not hearing what I'm trying to say. You know I'll always be here.
So that's with our plugin engaged. Now, the 1176 Blue I really favor on lead vocals. So you can hear right away the character it adds. So let's start right from the beginning again and hear bypass on that.
How many times can I say it? I don't know why you don't think we can make it. If we just
So what I noticed right away is there's some personality that was just pulled away from it. So I can tell right in a few beats that, wait a second. Now put it back on. Let me just hear that first bit again.
How many times can I say it?
I can hear this warmness and fullness to the feel, and it kind of controls his dynamics, and it makes it sound like he's right singing in your ear. So stop it right there. So I'm really excited about what the texture does right away. The vocal recording, which is great to begin with, as soon as we control the dynamics, it starts to just have character and meld in with the track. Well, the concept behind the CLA bundle, as I talked with the designers, especially Mike Fratis, was he came down to my studio, came down to my mix room, and looked around and tried to figure out, well, what are you really using all the time? And what would be the devices you would really love to have us design? And it really boiled down to, well, I would love for you to take the blue stripe, the black bass, the real industrial strength tools that everybody knows about, and let's get those right so I can have 100 of them that all sound the same and work the same and not have to worry about them being so fussy. And it started out with the LA3, the 1176, and the LA2A, and that's what we finalized on, and having the blue and the black and just going through every single one that I have and finding the mid-ground that was the best of all of them. So why don't we take a quick peek we can start right with that first B section of the song, and we could actually listen to the two vocals together and hear the backgrounds, which have an LA2A, and the vocal, which of course has the Blue 1176. Take it away, Keith.
When there's doubt, I know everything will fall into place. Every bridge that we cross isn't easy. Every line that we draw, we don't mean it. When we say it in anger, we fall into danger. You're not hearing what I'm trying to say. You know I'll always be here for you, no matter what we.
So what I notice right now is it glues it right together. So why don't maybe we could solo those background vocals with the LA2 on it, right there in the beginning of the chorus, and let's see how much gain reduction we're getting to create that sound.
Always be here for you, no matter what we've both been going through. If we take a different route, we can work it out, 'cause we both have so much to lose. You know that.
Okay, so I love how that feels. Really generous amount of compression. Add some character right away. Now let's just listen to that same stretch in bypass and see what it does for us.
Always be here for you, no matter what we've both been going through. If we take a different route, we can work it out, 'cause we both have so much to lose.
What I find right away is that it comes kind of unglued for me. It glues it, the silkiness of the top end really feels well. The LA2A is more silky and more like a warm coat and less in your face, but it keeps the creaminess of the vocal together. So between the two vocals, those two together, let's solo the lead vocal and the backgrounds, showing that the 1176 and the 2A, how these two plugins, even though they're different styles, how the vocals work together with the plugins on. Let's just play that same stretch.
Always be here for you, no matter what we've both been going through. If we take a different route, we can work it out, 'cause we both have so much to lose.
That's great. I love how it glues it together. The backgrounds have a width to them. The lead vocal has an in-your-face effect to it. So this just shows the power right away of the 1176 Blue and the LA2A. I find that certain compressors out of my collection do well on certain instruments. So I have some go-to compressors that I use for vocals. Blue 1176s, black 1176s, and even more recently the 176, which is a reissue, the Retro 176, which is a new version of the actual original Yuri 176. So that's with the vocals. Now the LA3As, which is yet another flavor, turned out to be my real go-to limiter for guitars, acoustic instruments, certain keyboards, and tended to be always used in the chain. The more newer 1176s, the black, even the silver-faced, tended to go into the drum department and help me there for the drum sounds. So why don't we focus now on some elements in the track. Let's go right to the drums, and we could start right in probably verse 2 is where a good section of the drums, and kind of look at just soloing the drums and hearing what they sound like. We're using black 1176 plugins on the drums. Those I feel work the best for the drums. So let's take a gander at verse 2 with the plugins we've selected. Now that you see what we're doing there, let's just try that same stretch and bypass. You see that what it does, you get some sustain off the kick. The snare has a little bit of a ring quality to it, and when it's in the track, it really feels like you're in there with the drum kit. Now what I notice right away while it's playing is that I hear too much point, and I hear too much of what I call the digital thing, which is the plugins kind of round off and make it feel a bit more analog, a bit real. I hear the snare like a little bit more ring, and I hear the kick a little bit more sustain. So let's look at another part of the drum kit, since we're hearing the whole drum kit together. A couple of other places that I'll use it is the overheads. So let's just look right at the overhead tracks and we'll kind of play them during that section, and they're using the black 1176 plugins, and show you what the difference is between regular, with the plugin on, and without. Because it has the plugins on, you hear some sustain, you hear a little bit more ring right away. So if we back up that same little section and go on bypass, let's see what happens. What you do is you lose a little bit of level, maybe because that's just, just a level thing, but what you notice is that there's this character and this ring that normally comes with the drums that kind of goes away by not having the 1176s in. When you start combining all the drums, getting a little taste of the black 1176, it goes from just a couple of mics set into a room to almost all the way to John Bonham. And the feeling of the room being alive and the drums being alive and really poking out in the mix, which to me is very important. The vocals, the drums, two very major important parts of your mix. The things that really set apart the presence of the mix. And the use of these plugins in the mix is really what's helping us. So let's see what happens when we take a mono room, which is just one mic set out in the middle of the room for the drums, and see what happens when you put a little abuse on it. Now we can take the input and drive that even harder, and this is with the all buttons in. Let's see how she takes a bit more brutality. All of a sudden it got explosive. So start that section one more time without all buttons in. You hear the distance and the size and how long the snare drum gets, and you're like, wow, I really like that. How can I get that all the time? Well, the great thing is you can get that by having the plugin and by using the all buttons in, which gives it kind of a different character. Different, more aggressive thing, kind of something you did on the old limiters, but by using the plugin, you'll get that the same every time you go for it, where if I go and put all 4 buttons in, I don't know what I'm gonna get. I might get an explosion sometimes with the old gear. So let's just hear that mono room without anything on it and see what really it sounds like. So like with the other room, it's pretty just, uncompressed, pretty straight ahead, and maybe a little bit unexciting. But when you put all buttons in again, let's hear that. That gives you a taste of kind of what we do with the drums with the black 1176s. Each one of these units sounds different. That's the thing about the 1176s, the LA3s, and the LA2s. They all sound different. So the real tricky part was going through them all and finding the character that worked to make the one plugin for each one. And I think it was great to have, since I have a pretty good variety of them all, that when we scoped them all out, tested them all out, and tried them all, that we said, well, this unit's attack is really good, but this unit's release is really good. This unit's distortion might be too much, and this unit doesn't really distort enough. Because part of the character really is kind of the distortion, is the attitude it adds. So these are devices that it was just the perfect thing to make a plugin from, because everybody who has them feels the same way about, they're all different. Some are great, some are bad. We'd love to have one that we could start with on the way in and have it always sound great. Time is kind of your enemy with the old gear. And by modeling them while they're still like in their heyday, they're still really having a sound, is you're modeling something that A, they're not gonna make anymore, and B, it's something that's not gonna improve, and it's gonna be harder to get it kind of when it still has a vibe. I mean, these old compressors that have been around 40 years, if you rebuild them and wire them to fix them up so they'll work, they're not gonna have that thing that they had. So with all this old gear, by modeling it now, we almost make a timestamp of it So we can have that tool tucked away. We can still have the old gear, we can still limp it along probably for 100 more years, you know, whatever it takes, but it's not gonna be still original. A lot of these things are kind of still original, and the capacitors have dried out. That's part of the sound. So really after a while, it's like a Fairchild. I mean, if you don't model it soon, you're never gonna be able to model it because its heyday's over. So let's go to a plugin we haven't touched on yet, which is the LA3s. My first favorite place I found for LA3s was acoustic guitars, because they're pointy and spiky and they never seem to fit in the mix, and some limiters just don't do it. And acoustic guitar is used a lot. So, and in rock songs, you kind of want to have them driving and loud without, you know, being real small and glassy. So let us look at the track and find what the acoustics are, and let's solo those up and hear what those sound like with our LA3A plugins on them. I listen to the acoustics and I'm like, wow, those really groove and feel good to me, and they have the sustain. Let's hear it without the plug-in, and let me be surprised how they really are. You could play the mix now with those acoustics in. Let's just play a piece and see how clear they are in the mix.
Trials that we're facing, if we don't give up hope, then we've made it. Every wall that we climb, we get stronger inside. Can't you hear what I'm trying to say? You know
So what I noticed is that before, I would only, if I didn't have the LA3s on it, I would only kind of just hear the peak of the acoustic just popping out. Because as you notice with the rock song, that acoustic guitar may only have a really small parking spot. How about like a motorcycle spot? He can only squeeze his car into the tiniest parking spot so you can actually hear him. So that's the part of the thing that makes it exciting, is that you can actually find a space for him so you hear him and he doesn't eat up valuable parking for drums, vocals, and other guitars. So I hear his whole texture now when we use the LA3 on him. So what's another thing we use the LA3 on? Let's try some other rhythm guitars. What that did is that took the dynamic, even though distorted guitars have basically zero dynamic, what it does is it adds the tone from the LA3, which adds its own frequency curve, and actually just pushes it more in your face. Even though it might be just sitting at zero level-wise, it pushes it into your face more by driving more compression in it. Now, if we listen to the track without the compressor, let's just play that little piece again. What I noticed is different, aside from maybe the level, you know, when you pop a plug in and pop it out, you're going to have a little bit of a level change. But what I noticed is the tone. By using the LA3, the tone gets creamier, and because sometimes a high guitar that's distorted will feel like, you know, like a bee buzzing around your head. You're like, oh my God, I can't handle that. It's just too bitey. But it makes it sound creamy for me, which means it's clear, but it can take up space without biting. So let's just listen to that guitar riff back in the track with the LA3 on it. So what I find right there is that what the compressor does by adding some creaminess to it is it found its little niche. It found its spot in the song. And the real key to all these plugins is that when you add them up and pile them up, you notice that everything starts to have its own space. And a very important part about mixing is to be able to create space for other instruments. And the great thing about the classic compressors is that each one of them has a texture and a tone that will give it space in the mix. So if you used it on every single instrument, you could actually create more space for more instruments, especially in today's music. People are trying to carve in more guitars, more riffs, more vocals, and their biggest problem is, wow, where am I going to find space for all this? Well, this is actually like the Magic Space Maker because it controls the dynamics and gives it a place to go. Everyone with a Pro Tools rig that wants to try out compression, this is the best compressors to start with because they are literally copying the first greatest compressors ever made. The compression that started the whole compression thing were basically these three: 2A, 3A, 1176, designed by Bill Putnam. Aside from Abbey Road, custom building compressors for the Beatles and the Fairchild, and a few esoteric ones, I mean, the tool that's been in every studio, every recording studio since they began, has been these three. So it's really, I mean, if you really look at it, and it's not me saying, hey, let's use the CLA stuff. How about it? These are the tools that you should have to try out. And this is what I think are the best emulations of these classic tools.
I'll always be here for you, no matter what we've both become.